you know, what the likelihood would be if something blew up or if your name got out, because this was major sweep and change. And students had not done this before. They'd done it up in Greensboro, but we hadn't done it in Atlanta. So we were activist students. I also remember Rosalyn Pope
Wait just a second. John, come on back in.
Working on the statement.
Start again, I remember Ross.
I remember Rosalyn working on the Statement for Human Rights. She edited it. She did a beautiful job, and the people downtown here at the State House thought that, oh, no student over there could be that capable and write a document like that. But she was a Renaissance woman, you know? I mean, after all, she'd won a big scholarship, and she was very brilliant and creative and just downright smart. And so, you know, she pulled it off.
Let's talk about going to jail. I mean, I would be scared to go to jail now.
Oh, well, I was afraid to go to jail, but Al and I were together, and we were arrested. And, you know, the assignments were two, and a Morehouse man with Spelman woman. And as I recall it, I don't remember many students from Clark or Morris Brown at that point, but they were involved. But I just remember the Spelman Morehouse students. And so we had talked about it, you know, and you know, we were a little nervous, but, you know, we were good colleagues. He dated one of my dear college friends. He married her, and they've been married forever. But so we were talking about just personal things, academic things, just to kill the time. But when we walked in there, as soon as we walked in and sat down, we didn't have too much time to kill. We were just talking, and we walked in, and as soon as we sat down, and Al had me by the arm most of the time, and the cameras were all over us, and police started coming, and then we were pulled out and pulled in a paddy wagon. This is the first time I'd ever seen inside of a paddy wagon. You know, it's all padded up. That's why they called it a paddy wagon. I didn't know that before then. And then when we got in jail, we were put in jail, and we had to be signed in, and we were put in a big room. And I mean, it was not a nice environment, but I don't think the police officers, the staff at the jail, I'm sure they didn't expect us, didn't want us, but they were not brutal or said mean things or swore at us or what have you. And of course, we always attributed that to the leadership in the city of Mayor Hartsfield and of people in the Atlanta University City. I wanted to say, I don't remember the students from as clearly from Morris Brown and Clark. The institution, Spelman, Morehouse, and Atlanta University, was really one center, and then there was Clark, before it was Clark Atlanta, and Atlanta University and Morris Brown College. But other than for the Atlanta University Center, the colleges were really like academic silos. I don't know what kind of joint activities were held. I can't remember any. I know that we used to go up to Morris Brown for the football games, but not because Morris Brown was playing, but that's where Morehouse College played football in the Morris Brown Stadium. Morehouse and Clark did play, and I guess that was the biggest, biggest student-related activity between the two schools. Now, with Spelman and Morehouse, there were always activities. And with Atlanta University, there was the Atlanta University Choir, and if you were an upper class person at Spelman, you could take classes at Morehouse, which I did, because I was a political science major, and we didn't have that at Spelman, but you had to get permission. And of course, when you went to class, I went to Dr. Brisbane's class. I was the only woman in the class. In all the classes, you were called Miss Gary, Miss whatever your last name was, that's what you were called. And
One of the things I've noticed in this movement, the SCLC, NAACP was very male-dominated.
Absolutely.
But the student movement here in Atlanta, like you said, you had not just one, several brilliant women. Why was that? Why were women able to shine in several different positions? And I'm not talking about, you know, being out front marching, but the appeal was heavily female written. A lot of the organization was very, very.
Well, Spelman women we were very involved and very activist. I mean, Howard Zinn's influence was formidable. Not only that, but before he came, I don't know exactly before he came because he came about during the time I was a freshman, but there were other strong women who were at Spelman who were active in the NAACP, whose parents were active in the NAACP, and people like Miss Marguerite Curry, for example, Miss Holloway, the head of the art department, and we knew people like Mr. Calhoun, who was head of the, just active in the city. And we had gotten to know some of these people just by being involved and talking with them. With Dr. Moreland, she did a survey where several Spelman students were involved, and we'd go out to Hartsfield Airport every Saturday morning. And the purpose was to check to see how many blacks were getting off the planes. We were doing research to show that, you know, some things were changing, people were using all the facilities. And so we did that for a long time. I don't mean for years, but we made several trips, and it was a thrill riding with her. She had an old Chevrolet. She was as sharp as a tack dresser and smart as a whip. And she talked about rights. I mean, that was a big part of the conversation. And so there were 3 or 4 of us piled in the back of her car. And we just had a growing consciousness. In addition, in Atlanta, there was a stronger middle class, black middle class, in fact, black upper middle class, that I think you'd have to be mindful of. In addition, there were large churches, Wheat Street, Ebenezer, many others, and I can't think of all the names. We used Friendship, oh, for goodness sakes, yes, that's where Spelman was founded. And, you know, they had activists, well-informed, articulate ministers, and we would go to hear them in Spelman. They'd march us all the way down from Spelman to Friendship. That's where Spelman was founded, and we would go. And so there was a growing respect for the role of women. And on the faculty at Spelman, you know, women held their own. I can think of many. There was a male president, Dr. Manley, but who was, and I would say, a very fine person. I had gotten to know him. He's often criticized as being very paternalistic in this whole movement. He was. He had no choice. He was the secondary father to all of these 300 or 400 students, girls at Spelman. Parents expected him and the Spelman faculty to protect the girls. Protecting girls in the South at that time was a different issue and concern than protecting the boys or the young men at Morehouse or the older students at Atlanta University, you see. So he had that role, and he was gentle towards us. He was concerned. He would talk with Lonnie King about us, making sure that we were all protected. So people say he was paternalistic, and I said, yes, he was. And that was exactly what was expected him by the parents of the students, too. There was confidence in him. Now, he was not the activist or the great orator like Benny Mays. He didn't have that kind of presence. No one else in the center did except young Martin Luther King Jr. So, you know, you get that kind of comparison, which is not always, I think, it's not well thought out, what was his role at the time. And now, it was changing. I'm not I do think he was more conservative, but I think that Spelman was more conservative. You remember that the students at Spelman were not all, but several were the daughters of women of racial uplift, the women who had built the black middle class. And if you say, why were women so engaged? There's a strong spirit and knowledge at Spelman when I was a student about Josephine Ruffin, Mary Church Terrell, Ada B. Wells Barnett. I mean, we knew who those women were. And I knew some of the names before I ever got to school because my mother was involved and engaged in that kind of work. Mm-hmm.
What about your notes? Have we missed anything that you had planned to talk about?
I see one point was that Spelman had the largest number of students in the early days of the student movement, which I'm very proud of. And that was because of, I think, that we were the daughters, many of us were daughters of women of racial uplift, but also because of the political environment at Spelman, you know. Dr. Manley, he was considered conservative, but he did a lot to bring people into the campus to speak with us, to open it up. And of course, when Martin Luther King was assassinated, they brought his body and had the open house at Spelman. So the school has always been on the forefront, and there were women who were behind the scenes even then, who were very activist people